And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com. And no, you did not tune into the wrong channel. You are watching this on Sci-Fi for Me, as well as Critical Blast, because this is what Spike Lee would call a joint. One of the things he would call a joint. We're going to work this as a concurrent podcast. This might blow up into something that Jason and I do regularly. I would. Which way is Jason? Jason's going to be this way for me from now on. This would be something that I think we could work out, make this thing work. What do you think, man?
I think we could, just depending on if I got enough bandwidth to go to 4 different channels now. Because yes, we are simulcasting to both Sci-Fi for Me TV, all 3 of our video destinations, as well as the Critical Blast channel. And the reason for that is kind of a special occasion tonight because of our guest. So,
yes.
it's our first show and it's our first guest, and he's kind of a special guest. So,
and well, I knew when the opportunity came through to interview Mr. Warshaw that there was going to be crossover appeal for my audience and your audience. And I was like, hey, nobody watches my show. Everybody watches your show. Why don't I help you out with the guest and you help me out with viewers?
Right. Well, that works. That works. Now I am getting some kind of indicator here that we may get some buffering tonight, just because. But I want to give everybody a heads up that just in case you start seeing Winky Blinky's kind of circle in the drain, we're still here. So there we go. So
Internet.
So yeah, Howard Scott Warshaw, notorious for his stuff, but he's got a new book. It's called Once Upon Atari. Howard, welcome to the program. What can you tell us? What do you want to tell us about the book? How did this start?
Well, the book started actually decades ago when people kept asking me, hey, Howard, when are you going to write the book about Atari? Because people always assumed I would. And eventually I felt I needed to, just to resolve. Atari was such an amazing and incredible experience in my life. I'm still unraveling it. I'm still trying to resolve it in my mind. And it took years of actually just writing a book, and after making a documentary series by the same name, to really work this all out. But finally, I decided, Once Upon Atari, How I Made History by Killing an Industry. Its time had come. And today, I'm honored to be here. Thank you. I feel like I love this 3-set. It's like I feel like the ham in a sandwich, and I think I'm the right person for that.
Well, and you say you killed the industry. I mean, you're responsible for you were a game designer. You gave us Yar's Revenge, you gave us Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you gave us E.T. And I guess that's the one that you're attributing to the death of Atari and the video game industry collapse and whatever. I mean, that's a mighty powerful weapon.
It's a lot of blame to take on yourself.
Well, the idea that I was able to topple a multi-billion-dollar industry with 8K of 2600 code is it's a powerful attribution. I have to say at the outset that the subtitle to my book is ironic, in the sense that I don't really believe that I actually destroyed the industry myself. I think the industry imploded on itself due to its cultural shift and a lot of things that are detailed in the book. But I will say that, whenever there's a tragedy, and the fall of the video game industry in the early 80s, I think qualifies as a major disaster. Certainly was disastrous in a lot of people's lives. As journalists, you all know that whenever you have a big story, a big tragic story, you need a face. You need to put a face on it to personalize it, to tell people the story. And I think E.T. sort of became the face of the fall of the video game industry, and I wound up being the butt behind that face.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, but I wasn't. I also wasn't privy to trade magazines in that industry at the time. I was not a preteen, but I was a young teenager, and I remember playing all of these games for hours on end. We were finding things by accident. I remember one of the things we used to do was we would play and replay Defender, because if you've got the ship on a certain line at a certain place, the ship would transmogrify into the initials of the developer who had coded it, and that was just the coolest thing to us. Yeah, and it was like, once you did, it's like, well, okay, there it is. Now what? Well, there it is. That's cool, isn't it? I've been in the IT industry for 35 years since that point, and I'm like, yeah, it's not that hard to pull off.
Although,
Not hard to pull off, but it's a fun thing to discover. Easter eggs were something we all put a lot of thought and effort into because it was worth it. It was like one of those payoff moments in games, and we always thought every game should have some good play and then something else, something extra.
well, and we've got a comment in the chat from Mazers. My favorite was Mountain King. That soundtrack was amazing when you got far enough into a round to get it going.
I don't remember.
I don't remember Mountain King myself.
There are a number of Atari compatible games that were out in there, because Activision came out, and that was not Atari, but it was playable on Atari.
Yeah.
I don't know who the producer was, but one of my friends in high school had this thing called Custer's Revenge, and just Google that sometime when you're alone at night. And
yeah, that was not an Activision game, but the people who went and made those games approached me to make X-rated games for them. That was so funny. It was at a CES back in '82, and that was really something. It was really funny. They wanted people to get like A-grade Atari and Activision programmers to try and make these knockoff porno games, and but they weren't really offering much money for it, which was the thing that really killed it for them.
So was this before Leisure Suit Larry hit the market?
This was before
yes.
Leisure Suit Larry.
All right.
This was the lounge that Leisure Suit Larry came from.
I'm just thinking, how desperate do you have to be that you're giddy for 8K porn, 8-bit porn?
It's probably
Custer's Revenge was just stick figures pretty much.
Well, it's in that same category with watching the scrambled pay-per-view on the late night, right? I mean, because
absolutely
you
squiggle
can't see
vision.
anything. Yeah, I mean, same kind
I
of
learned
thing,
to build
right?
a stub tuner.
So Howard, I mentioned before the show, I've got a surprise. And I do have a surprise. I want to go ahead and do that and get it out of the way, because we need to spend the time on a substantive conversation, of course.
Something you actually did.
Yeah. But I've got here on the desk my Atari 2600, which I had when I was a kid, and this has been sitting in my parents' garage for nigh on way too long. And I have in my hand E.T.
Awesome.
I have the cartridge, and I've still got the instruction manual. I got it. Now,
You should see if you can mail it to Howard and get him to sign it for you and mail it back.
funnily enough, I also happen to have here a TV.
That's going to come in handy.
It still works. And the funny thing is, I went and I had all these game cartridges that were in the box with the console, and certain cartridges just kind of you gotta jiggle them a little bit to make them work. This one fired right up. I didn't have to do anything to it. Just popped it in, turned it on, and there it goes. So.
This game cannot wait to be played.
Right.
And shortly thereafter, it cannot wait to be put away.
I will say I had fun playing E.T. and I had frustration playing E.T. I always ended it with, why am I playing this game? But then I would always come back to it. It was like, maybe I can walk around. I didn't have a problem getting out of the pits. I just kept walking right into them. I couldn't navigate the paths around the pit field.
Either that or you loved drama.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and I saw a video, Howard, where you're talking about, you know, the bugs and, you know, the trouble that was part of this thing, and you had gotten to a point where it was just, I could take just another day to work this thing out, but I'm just not gonna. I mean, it just became this headache for you, I guess. How difficult was this game to develop in the first place, really?
Well, it was the toughest 5 weeks of my life, and I've had some rough times in my life, I'll tell you. But you have to remember that, okay, Yar's Revenge took 7 months to create, and Raiders of the Lost Ark took 10 months. I was given 5 weeks to do ET. Nobody did a game. I mean, games took 6 to 8 months. 5 months would have been a really accelerated development. I was given 5 weeks to do it. No one believed it could be done. My boss's boss told the CEO of the company, he laughed when he said, we need ET in 5 weeks. He just laughed at him. If you can't do a game in 5 weeks. But then the CEO called me directly and said, hey, Howard, we need ET for September 1st. This was July 27th. And he goes, can you do it? I said, absolutely, I can do it. I didn't know that he had called my boss's boss already and been rejected. And I was confident. I was super confident that I could do it. And I did it. It's like people talk about the bugs, but there really aren't a lot of bugs. There's no collision detect bugs. There are some sins that were committed in the design, but the game passed quality assurance. It's not a bug. What's interesting about ET is, the big complaint is the pits, right? Everybody complains you fall into the pits too easily. One of the problems with having to navigate through the narrow spaces here and there is part of the gameplay, right? That's part of the challenge. That's the eye-hand coordination. One of the problems with ET is that the graphics were so good. My graphics artist, Jerome Demuret, did such a good job with the graphics on this game that people really bought into them as characters. If you're just a tank or if you're just a blob walking around the screen, it doesn't matter what part of you touches a pit. But for some reason, when the head would touch a pit, people would go, well, that shouldn't happen. This is a person. Only their feet should matter when they touch the pit. So people actually bought into the character enough that it kind of undermined the concept of the game. But that's not really the big problem with ET. I'll tell you, you want to know the big problem with ET?
Sure. I'd love to know it, because I know
I've only had about 30 or 40 years to think about this. So the big problem with ET is that it commits the fundamental sin of video games. And that is that with a video game, it is not only okay to frustrate the player, it's necessary, right? Frustration is an integral part of a video game, because if there's no frustration, there's no payoff, there's no satisfaction. But what you cannot do in a video game is disorient the player. And ET does that. When you first pick up ET, if you're not familiar with the game, you don't understand the game world and the dynamics, it is way too easy to suddenly just wind up somewhere else. How did I get here? What's going on? And you're disoriented. And that's the sin. And ET does that too easily.
Now, I think if I'm recalling what you're talking about directly here, is like you would walk off the left of the screen and you'd be on a new scene. If you turned around and walked back right, you didn't quite go back to where you had just left.
Well, you would go back to where you left. I mean,
okay.
But it wouldn't feel like that, because a lot of times you'd walk right into a pit, and instead of going to the screen you expected to be on, you'd start falling into a pit because you didn't remember there was a pit right over there. See, the thing is, it wasn't enough that I had to do a full game in 5 weeks. One thing I needed to do with every game that I did was innovate. I wanted every game I did to be groundbreaking in some way. Yar's Revenge was super ground, right? Yar's Revenge set new standards all over the place for the video game industry. The first full screen explosion, the first backstory for a game, the first pause mode. There was a lot of things you had that became standards in video games that I initiated with Yar's Revenge. Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the biggest adventure games there was a huge play space. With ET, the challenge was getting it done in 5 weeks, which is insane in the first place. And I can tell you about that because I am now a psychotherapist. But
yes.
I also needed to innovate. I did so, like ET was the first time anyone actually had a 3D world to play on. ET is played on a cube, essentially. The game world in ET is a cube. And as you move around, the world is consistent. If you move here from this screen, you always go to the next screen logically on the cube, right? So it does work that way, but it doesn't fully translate. The way people relate to space in their heads on a 2D video screen is not the same as a 3D thing. So I was a little ahead of my time. It also has location specific power-ups, right? That was another revolutionary concept. You know, your button had so many different functions depending on where you were standing. I don't think anybody had done that before. So I was able to innovate. Most of those innovations just saved me time in coding.
Right.
That's very cool. I think the game I was conflating the map of ET with the map on Superman.
Oh,
And
yes.
Oh, that
Superman
could
was
well
my
be.
least
That could
favorite
well
game
be.
on Atari. That one would drive me. I never finished Superman. It just drove me crazy all the time.
That one was just, funny enough, I've actually got that one sitting over here on the console because that one still works here for me too. But you're right. That's the one where, you know, you could be flying along and then you go back, or you hit a door and you're suddenly inside a room and wait a minute, how did I get here? And you know, Howard, you talk about disorienting the player. That
Exactly.
one is terrible.
And I always explain the difference between frustration and disorientation. It's like frustration is you're in the kitchen, you see the cookie jar, you just can't reach it, right? You can't figure out how to get it. That's frustration.
Yeah.
Disorientation is like I step into the kitchen to get a cookie and I wind up in the garage. And suddenly I'm in the garage. Like, what the hell am I doing in the garage?
And you go back through the door you just got into the garage from, and you wind up in your neighbor's bathroom. That was
Yeah.
Exactly. Then you might as well just flush the whole thing at that point,
Yeah.
which a lot of people did with ET.
Well, and how did so the landfill legend, you know, it keeps getting bigger in the telling, and you know there were millions of copies that were buried and whatnot. You had this, you know, this place out in Alamogordo where it was, you know, all of this stuff was buried and excavated, and now we find them again. But it wasn't just E.T. that was buried out there. It wasn't, you know, let's take this game and memory hole it because it's such a terrible embarrassment for us. The landfill thing had other games. So why even bury them in the first place? What was the story behind that?
Okay, so and that's a really good question. I mean, there was the urban legend that ET was so bad Atari had to literally bury these games just to get the stench away from them and to do it. I denied that it was true for many years because a company that's failing financially, why would they spend extra money to go get rid of a product that's worthless?
Yeah.
You could just throw open the doors of the warehouse, say, everybody, hey, come get it. You know, get rid of them, and it wouldn't cost you anything. But the truth of it was they were trying to empty a warehouse to make space for something else. And that's why it wasn't just ET. So as is frequently the case, some of the greatest legends and lies of all time start with a kernel of truth, right? The truth was Atari needed to clear out a warehouse. They wanted to put this stuff somewhere because there was a lot of viable product that was there too. They just needed to clear it out. They didn't want people dumpster diving all over El Paso. So they shipped it out into Alamogordo and they bulldozed over it and they poured cement. They really did everything they could to really remove these games from civilization. And it was all kinds of games. It was. But the legend was that it was just about ET, that ET was that bad. It was so bad. And then I was there at the dig. And remember, I told you I want every game of mine to be groundbreaking, right? And Yar's Revenge was, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was. And on April 26th of 2014, they dug a hole deep enough and E.T. became groundbreaking too in a way I had never anticipated.
That's funny. I can just imagine archaeologists digging these things up 1,000 years from now and trying to piece together the story and the logic of why all this stuff is the same thing as here.
Well, there were archaeologists at the dig. It was very interesting. They actually brought anthropologists and archaeologists in to comment on and to observe, to catalog. It's if you watch the movie Atari Game Over, They actually have some of them there. It's an interesting show. But my book, Once Upon Atari, covers basically that day. It covers the whole development of ET and everything that went on with that, and my entire career in Atari and my life outside of Atari. So you could say that what it is it's the story of a day that was the product of 5 weeks that warped an entire life. And all of that is there. And the timelines all intersect and weave in and out together. So it's I don't know. It took me years to write. I feel like, paperback writer, the old Beatles song. It took me years to write, literally, but it was harder to write this book than it was to do ET. I hope the book does better.
We're not going to dig a pit to put books in. We don't do that. And
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Here. You mentioned your life outside Atari, and being a developer and having been one for years, but knowing what it was like back in the early 80s. One of my favorite documentaries is Clifford Stoll's The Cuckoo's Egg, which he self-filmed. And he was a developer, and it was like, what is this life outside that you speak of? Did you have much life outside of Atari?
When I was at Atari, there was no life outside Atari. When I say life outside Atari, I mean on the timeline outside Atari. My life before Atari and after Atari, because you're absolutely right. It's a very astute observation. The idea is that when you're really a game developer, there isn't a lot of life outside of it. In fact, that's one of the things I discuss in there. In fact, there's a chapter called Nerd World Country, right? Which is because one of the things I do in this book is try to explain nerd culture and video game programmers and the mindsets that we have to non-technical people. I wanted to make that clear and explain it because programmers have a goofy mentality, right? Programmers have a weird way of thinking because what a programmer does is a programmer has to sit around and think of every possible messed up thing that could happen and account for it and handle it. And a bug is when you missed one possibility and you didn't account for it. You didn't cover that. That's a bug. Most people just deal with what mostly happens in life, and something else comes up. Well, we'll deal with it when it shows up. But programmers have to be able to anticipate the degenerate cases, like the weird outlying cases. And when you spend your life trying to think about the outlying incidents, the improbable things, it warps your sense of expectation and what life is like, and that's what creates programmers. That's why people who are not programmers have such a hard time talking to programmers, right? Because they'll try to have a conversation. Well, what about this? What about this? And they'll say, that's never going to happen. It could happen, and what if it does?
Well,
Howard, early in my career, I was a software tester for the Air Force Base. I was a civilian contractor, and the code was being written on Sybase by a bunch of junior airmen. And my job was to test these handhelds they were doing. So I turned in all these bug reports, but I was doing crazy things with these handhelds. Lieutenant Jason came in with a list, and he taped it to my wall. He said, the customer is never going to do these things. And he walked out. And 3 days later, he walked in with a Sharpie and crossed one off. Because the customer did it.
So
yeah, we have that warped sense.
You hear these stories about crunch. Jason Schreier just pretty much made his bones reporting on all of this in the gaming industry of the last, 2, 3, 4 years. And, now there's, calls to unionize and working conditions and all of these things. And I hear the lamentations and the woeful day exclamations as if this was a new thing. And I do see, where people say, well, crunch has always been part of the industry, but they're acting like this is something that, and I don't know if this is just a generational thing where the 20-somethings think that all of these problems originated in their generation and nobody's ever had to deal with this before. But compared to now, as much as compared to what the industry is like now, crunch has always been an integral part of the development process, has it not? I mean, you just get stuck with that as a reality of the thing.
It is a reality that when you're going to be a game developer, you've got to expect to devote the vast majority of your life to your work, and that's just the way it is. The big difference is now it's demanded, right? Now it's a requirement.
Right.
When I went to work at 3DO, I signed an offer letter. And in that letter, it said, well, you have a certain amount of vacation per year, but if you're in crunch, we have the right to cancel your vacation and pull you back or keep you from going. And we'll cover your plane tickets, but that's about it. So they, even in the offer letter you sign, it says that they can cancel your vacations if they want to. So it's a demand. And that's the part that's led to unions and things like that. And that actually makes a lot of sense to me. The difference is that back at Atari, it wasn't really crunch mode. It was the life we were pursuing. Because at Atari, we were so passionate. So, because we were defining this, right? We were pioneering a new medium. And that was incredibly exciting. It was incredibly exciting to be a part of this like new frontier of technology. And so you could go to Atari anytime, day or night, around the clock. There was always developers there doing it. Now, the crunch mode aspect came in a little later, because ET was definitely a piece of that puzzle. But what it was marketing people started to realize, hey, we can get licenses, and as long as you get something out to meet that window of demand for the license, it doesn't matter what the quality of the game is, let's push this out and get it going, which is a reasonable marketing strategy, but it's not a great development strategy.
Right.
And so it was very frustrating for developers, but the thing is, developers were always there all the time. I mean, I don't know if I took a vacation the first year and a half I was at Atari and didn't want to. You couldn't keep me away from my dev station because that work was so compelling. Now you actually have people who are required to come in, and it's demanded of them, and people burn out, and it's tough. And, you know, I can understand the unionization movement, but it used to be about desire, and now it's about forced labor.
You talked about how this was a 5-week project and it was successful. I mean, in terms of, you know, a timeline and turning out a project timeline and a product, it was successful. Did that change the way that Atari would plan out their future games going forward? I'm like, so if they said we could do it in 5 months, but we've proven we can do it in 5 weeks, so now we're going to do them in 5 weeks.
It's a great question. And I got to tell you, a lot of the developers were really upset at the idea that I would even take this project on. No one else would touch it. I mean, no one would touch it. And I'll tell you the proof. I tell this story in the book about in Once Upon Atari, there was a time where it was announced that I was doing ET. I was already 10% into the game, which means it was 3 days into the schedule. And there was a department meeting, and I showed up at the meeting, and it was announced Howard's doing ET, and everybody, oh, grumble, grumble, grumble. Everybody, oh, Howard gets to do the big titles and stuff. And this is July 30th. This was actually my birthday. Okay. I got to celebrate my birthday by crunching myself to death on a project. And so people are grumbling, and that's it. And I just stood up in the meeting. That in and of itself was not terribly unusual, I have to tell you. I stood up in the meeting. I said, hey, I said, ET is due September 1st. I said, anybody who wants it, just raise your hand, you can have it. Anybody. Crickets.
Yeah.
There was nothing. And that settled it. And so there was not a word about, oh, Howard gets to do ET. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted it. But about a week later, people started saying things like, hey, Howard, if you do this, if you actually do this, we're all going to have to start making games. You know, what if they want games in 5 weeks? And I just said, I'm never going to do a game like this again. I said, they can ask for it. It's obviously not going to happen. And if I had a better crystal ball at the moment, I would have said, hey, just wait to see how this turns out. Don't worry about them wanting more 5-week games. But it was a great moment.
So I'm hearing you worked on this by yourself. Is that right?
Yes, I had a graphic designer who did just literally drop the pixels for the graphics. I had a sound person who gave me the tune,
Mm-hmm.
the opening tune. And I did everything else in the game. I did 100% of the design. I did all the coding. I did some of the graphics. I did most of the sound. But that's the way it was. That's what was beautiful about being a 2600 game developer at Atari. It was your game
Yeah.
and you got to make it. The 2600 is like a small machine. There are individual data structures that are bigger than an entire game was. You think about now, it's not unusual for a game now to be like 10, 12, 14 gig easily, right?
Right.
Back then, a game was 4 or 8K, right? So games are literally a million times bigger than they were then. But the thing is, you got to, it's like the difference between a motorboat and a luxury liner, right? Now you can load a lot of stuff and a lot of people and a lot of fun and a lot of good times on a luxury liner. You can have some really good times on a luxury liner. But the one thing you can't do on a big luxury liner is change direction. And doing a game on the 2600 was like a speedboat. You may not be able to carry that much stuff with you, but if I see a place over there that looks interesting, I can go and I can see what it is. And then I can go over here and I can go over there. So when you got your midnight breakthrough, or you wake up at 3 a.m. with your aha moment, oh, here's what I want to do with the game, you can do it. You can change the whole direction and course of the game. I did that with Yar's Revenge. Yar's Revenge sucked in the middle of the development. That was a very difficult time for me because I laid everything on the line to make a game for Atari, and it turned out it wasn't working well. But it completely reversed direction and shifted a couple times and wound up in a really cool place. On a big game today, you just can't do that. You cannot suddenly redesign a game. You can't do that with a 200-person staff. And for me, I was much more interested in the auteurs model. With so much buy-in and so much responsibility, that's what got my blood running.
So at 3 days in, you were 10% into the coding and everything. How long did you spend? I mean, you don't just get given this and saying you're doing ET and you sit down, you say begin code, block 1. You have to know what's the game going to be. How long did it? How much pre-programming planning went into the idea of, okay, so he's going to have to go get components to build the phone. The FBI are going to be taking the components away, and he can get Elliot to come help. I mean, you had a lot of stuff going on in that game for what it was there.
I do. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I did. And it was, the thing that really served me in being a programmer at Atari was not my background in math and computer engineering. I had degrees in math and computer engineering when I went to Atari. I also had degrees in economics and theater. And those were the ones that actually really served me, because it was about allocating scarce resources and having a sense of showmanship, right? And so, but what you're talking about is design, just pure game design, because the biggest determinant of what the programming load is going to be on a project is the design, right? And you can design a game that takes longer to program, and you can design a game that takes less to program. So my primary design goal was to design a game that could be fun, but that was doable in 5 weeks, which is the opposite. Usually when you design a game, you say, I'm going to keep working on this game and keep playing with it until it's fun, and we'll see how long it takes. I didn't have that luxury. So, but I was given a whole 36 hours to design the game, because it was a Tuesday afternoon. Of course, you don't want to take much more time than that if you only have 5 weeks to do the game, right? But I mean, I got a call from Ray Kazar on a Tuesday afternoon saying, hey, you want to do ET? I said, absolutely, I can do it. He goes, okay, Thursday morning at 8 a.m., there will be a Learjet in San Jose Airport. Be on it. It's going to take you down to Burbank to see Steven Spielberg to present the game designed to him. So it was made clear to me that I have a day and a half to come up with a design and a presentation, get that all set, and then come back and start implementing. And so, And that whole design process, exactly the way I thought about it, the genres I considered, the ones I didn't, uh, the whys and the hows and the whats of everything that I did are all detailed in Once Upon Atari. How I made history by killing an industry. You think it's easy to kill an industry? It takes careful planning and skill.
You should have drove a stake deeper into its heart because it came back, and we've had to endure all kinds of, we've had to go through it causes school place shootings because kids are playing games. We had to go through the whole Gamergate fiasco and everything that sprung out of it. So yeah.
That raises an interesting point, though, is that people have asked me, people are frequently astounded at the idea that I was a very, intense programmer and then became a psychotherapist. A lot of people see those as like, it just doesn't seem like a comprehensible career path to people. And I always tell them, to me, it made perfect sense, right? If you think about it, programmers and therapists, we're all systems analysts. It's just that therapists work on much more sophisticated hardware, right?
Yes.
So to me, it was a natural progression. But you can also make a case for the idea that one of the reasons I became a therapist was to deal with the trauma and the depression that I had created with the ET game. As a way of sort of giving back.
I think you might be overcompensating a little bit there.
Well, why do it small?
Yeah, but I did want to ask, because you are a psychotherapist, and you mentioned how programmers' minds work differently than normal people's. How do you see being a programmer affecting your approach with patients in psychotherapy?
That's a good question, and it absolutely does. It really does. The way I look at it, one way you can look at therapy is that every client, every person is like a unique OS. Everybody, it's like, in the world, there are operating systems, and the whole idea of an operating system is to have a common basis for a bunch of people to be able to work on top of and be able to utilize the machine, right? But if you look at people, it's like everyone has their own unique OS. Everybody's operating on it. So the way I look at therapy is when the client comes into my office, it's my job to figure out the API for that's Jack the Wonder Dog. Okay. They got their OS, and it's a brand new one. It's a unique OS, and I've got to figure it out. I got to work the API, and that's going to enable me to help them get where they're trying to go. Right? So they come to me, they're an OS, and they have some sort of a product spec they're trying to meet. And I need to get into the API to be able to implement that product spec in their OS. That's like an internal model that I use for therapy that
that's
a nerd would understand.
Yeah, I can see that.
It all makes perfect sense. I'm a totally transparent therapist. And what I mean by that is, like, there are some therapists who will say stuff to, like, they'll give you some exercise or some like silly thing to do or something that feels silly. And you'll go, well, why am I doing this? And they'll say, just do it. And you'll see things are going to get better. It's going to work. I never do that. I can see why people do it. It's a valid thing to do. It does work for some people. I'm not comfortable doing that. My feeling is that I would never ask a client to do something I cannot justify them doing in a way they can understand. Because to me, there's no mystery about therapy. It's a straightforward process from here to a better place. And you should be able to go step by step from here to there and get there. And maybe that's the engineer in me also.
Jason, I'm trying to be quiet so you can jump in.
Oh no, I'm enjoying the conversation. When you look at the game industry now compared to when you were involved, and you have the sophistication of all of the graphics and the 3D and the VR and all this other stuff, and then you have the reactions when a game gets delayed, and you have the outcry and the rage and all of the social media activity that basically, they're calling out the designers. And I mean, you look at what happened with The Last of Us 2, and Naughty Dog's an evil company, and blah, various different things. Cyberpunk got delayed, and this game gets delayed, and all that. Do fans do gamers, and I'm not a gamer, so I'm asking this more out of ignorance than anything else. Does the gamer culture somehow encourage that kind of impatience? I want this game and I want it now. I want to play this game, and this game, what do you mean it's going to take another 3 months? You know, you announced it. It's supposed to be out in March. Why are you saying now it's going to be June?
We used to get games in 5 weeks.
Right? Yeah, it only,
Yeah,
only
what's
takes
up
5
with
weeks to
that?
put this together.
So, I mean, this is an interesting point, and it is a very significant thing, not just in gaming, but I think sociologically, this is a huge phenomenon that we deal with now. And games have contributed to that. I think it's computers that have really contributed to that, and games are just one thing computers do. I took when I was working, I have a certificate in video production as well, and when I was working in that coursework, I had a writing teacher, writing for television teacher, and what he used to say was, he used to say, the attention span of the average American is getting shorter by the minute. And it was just a great thing to say. And even if you look at TV shows, look at a TV show from 20 or 30 years ago and look at a similar genre TV show now, and you will be amazed at the difference in pacing between them. And computers have gotten faster and faster. Modems, you know, there's that old sound effect, bong, 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 you know, the sound of a modem coming on. That would drive people nuts now if you couldn't just click on a browser and open it up.
Right.
Computers have made things so fast that it has really warped our expectation of how fast something should be. If you really want an idea of how fast email should work, try taking out a piece of paper, writing a letter, addressing it, putting a stamp on it, mailing it, and wait for a response. And people get upset if their email is not responded to, you know, within a few minutes.
Yeah.
Or if there's a lag, if there is like a half-second lag between hitting the key and seeing the character appear on the screen, that this computer is a piece of crap. Oh my God, this is no good. If you think of the miracle that occurs with all that going on, and that is all the technology works so well to make it all happen so seamlessly that it's become a victim of itself. And it's done such a good job of simulating rapid response that it's changed people's expectations. And now people are actually more impatient than they used to be, I believe.
I have a friend of mine, a classmate in high school. She went on to become a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, Dr. Jean Twenge. And she and a couple of colleagues have studied this and have put out a number of books on what she calls iGen. This is an entire generation that's wired into the computers, and everything is instant gratification. Now. I can look it up on YouTube. I can look it up on Google, and it's right there. It's at my fingertips. And what do you mean I have to work for something? And the psychology of it, you know, and I run into this with my own kid. He's 20 years old, and you know, there's no, like you say, everybody is impatient. There's no appreciation for how long something takes. They want it now. They want it their way. And I look back on, you know, like you said, the computers are where we started with all of this, with the PC, and then moving forward with the internet, and now you got social media that's making everything all worse. And we actually talked about this today on the show, where we were talking about the Google AI. You know, is it sentient or not? It is whatnot. And I made the point that when we first got PCs, the idea was that this was going to lead to Star Trek. We were going to have a base on the moon and a colony on Mars, and you know, we were going to do all these great things. And here we are, you know, 40 years later, we're looking at cat videos and TikTok videos, and we're debating gender and identity, and you know, it's like somehow, somewhere, technology pulled us backwards instead of moved us forward, it feels like to me.
Technology got easy enough for the unwashed masses of the intelligentsia to use it. And they outnumber a lot of people. So
Well, does it exacerbate certain psychological problems? I mean, that's a bad question to ask, but the impact of the instant, the now, I want it now. Does that get exacerbated by easy access to information flow on the internet?
Well, I think what it does is it warps expectations. And that's really at the key, I think, of what you're talking about is expectation.
Yeah.
Okay. So technology changed our perception of how long we should wait for things. The internet changed our perception of how long it should take to connect with someone else. Social media has really changed the concept of what constitutes decent communication, what the ground rules are, what constitutes good communication used to mean decent grammar, possibly spelling okay, communicating, in a standard language.
Yeah.
And now language, catchphrases, shorthand are evolving so quickly, it's hard to keep up with. But there's also this thing that social media has done is this idea of instant recognition. The idea that I can succeed instantly if I do the thing that makes me get a deluge of likes and get attention. If I get enough eyeballs, then I can actually start getting income because I can get advertising revenue on my stream. And this idea that I can be an instant success and have it really pay off. And there's one or two examples where it's happened, which makes everybody think, oh, okay. So you got to be a sucker if you're going to go and really invest time and really work through and try and cultivate all these skills when you're really just a couple of minutes and a few clicks away from total success. And that mindset, this evolution for step by step by step, is undermining, frankly, a number of human values that used to stand for a long time. And one of the problems we have is the exponential growth curve. Right? The rate of change. In 1970, I think I read a book by a guy named Alvin Toffler called Future Shock, where he was talking about the accelerated rate of change and how that was going to impact people psychologically. Mm-hmm. And he was only brushing the surface. He had no idea what was really coming. So other people have been quite prescient. People like Carl Sagan have been incredibly prescient about where we were going to go, how this was going to happen. You can go back into the 80s and 90s and you see people who would qualify as prophets now because they totally called what we're seeing sociologically now. And it is, technology has done it. And the truth is, I feel partially responsible because, at a time where IBM was just reaching 5 figures worth. They were just hitting the 10,000 mark in terms of PCs in homes. Atari was putting millions of computers in homes because Atari was the killer app for putting computers in homes. And when people started to have computers in their homes, adding other computers and seeing what else you could do with a computer, that all became a natural evolution. But Atari, one of the big hidden impacts that Atari had on society at large was this was one of the things that really caused the computer revolution to accelerate and step into hyperdrive and really move forward. And in retrospect, then it was super exciting. I was really proud to be a part of that forefront. And now it's like, maybe I should have gone back to school.
All things considered, you should have been a watchmaker.
Well, and by the way, we here at this channel are not one of those who has stumbled into the instant success. I've made the joke that we're on the 15-year plan for overnight success. So we got 2 more years to go.
So many people are, though. It's true. The overnight success after 20 years, that's a very common story.
Yeah.
Howard, you mentioned the how computers have gotten so fast that we want instant gratification and instant connection. And we see that. I mean, 60 seconds for my burrito in the microwave is intolerable these days. But at the same time, we want more, and we want it fast. Because going back to what you mentioned about watching the old TV shows and the pacing being different, that was for a 30-minute show. Now we want the whole season, and we want to draw it out over 12 episodes. We don't want 30 minutes of Twilight Zone. We want to binge all Saturday and all Saturday night on Stranger Things.
It's true. We want our instant gratification, and we're willing to devote a whole weekend to it. So
Which
you have
is
that going. And there's an old joke that I really like is, did you hear about the new Cray computer that's coming out, the new Cray supercomputer? It's so fast, it can run an infinite loop in 2 minutes. Now that's fast.
That's very fast. Oh, we do the same thing with games, though. I mean, we play Yar's Revenge, 7, 8 times in the space of an hour, and then we'd go eat dinner or go ride our bikes, or whatever. Now we're getting, these games where it's like, don't call me this weekend because I'm doing a speed run.
Yeah.
I'll tell you an interesting psychological phenomenon that goes on now in current tech. Okay. Tell me how familiar this is to you. What do you want to do? I don't know. You want to watch a movie? Okay. How long is that movie? It's like, 2 hours. I don't really want to watch a 2-hour movie. Instead, I'm going to watch like a 5 or 10 minute YouTube video. And 4 hours later, I will have been watching 5 or 10 minute YouTube videos, but I didn't have time to watch a 2-hour movie.
the rabbit
right?
hole. Yeah.
And it's an interesting phenomenon. The idea that, because what we're talking about now is not spending time. What we're talking about is commitment, is planning. So if I do have a series and I have all the episodes of the series, I'm willing to commit to a binge because I know I'm doing that. But if I'm not really just allocating my weekend, if I just think I'm going to do something in the moment, I don't want to pretend that I'm actually throwing away a couple of hours because I want to pretend I'm still going to do other things, right? It's a genius procrastination opportunity. So
That's
instead
how I
of
got to the level I'm at on Candy Crush.
yeah, so I'm just going to play a couple of things. I'm going to do something that's just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to go do what I'm going to do. And 3-4 hours later, I'm going to wake up and go, well, I guess maybe I could have watched the movie. I wasn't going to do that then. My time's too important to me.
I've had that happen a number of occasions, especially over the last week. I have found myself looking up at the clock at 3:30 in the morning and thinking, oh, it's 3:30 in the morning. But I've been working on things. It hasn't been just drooling at the desk and not just mindless whatever. It's graphics, and video editing and podcasts and whatever. But the irony of this, I don't know if anybody will notice, I am wearing my Starlog T-shirt, but I had the chance to talk to David McDonnell, who was the editor-in-chief at Starlog for a number of years, managing editor. And he said one of the things that really struck him was when the internet became a thing, and Starlog was a print magazine, and they made the attempt to do some stuff online. But he said one of the things that's always struck him as odd is the fact that the media and journalism and blogs and whatever else, you have now the chance to write an article that's as long as you need it to be. One of the things that they ran into all the time constantly at Starlog was the fact that you only have so many pages. You've only got so much space or else it costs more. And now you can write, you've got infinite scroll. You can write however long the article is, and everything's getting shorter. It's all bite size, and it's all little pieces and listicles and photo galleries, and here's the top 10 reasons why Green Lantern is a terrible character, and all these things. And you talk about commitment, but I think also attention span is got to be in there somewhere too, right?
It is. And you're making a really good point, because there's an important distinction to make here. What you were talking about is if you're editing and you're practicing your craft and you're doing work, this is not just watching some videos to pass time. Right? You want to differentiate between immediate gratification and flow. Okay. Flow, I think, is what you were talking about, I think. And flow is an amazing moment where time disappears, because what I'm doing, I'm so present and I'm bringing my full attention to something so completely that my concept of time, my perception of time disappears, and time just disappears, but it goes productively. I am moving forward. That's not the same thing as avoidance or denial. And that's what happens when I sit down to watch a 5-minute video, because my goal isn't to really get into this video. My goal is to not do the thing I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And that's how I can spend it. So there's avoidance and there's flow. And flow is still a very important thing. And I think it has real value. And for people who practice a craft, for people who get into something that really can consume their attention, flow, I think, is a restorative thing that gives us a more balance and a sense of being able to be present, to be in some place for a while. But there is so much pressure now when you're bombarded with so many possibilities and so much stimulus. It's very hard to block it all out, and you end up anticipating where it's going to have to come the next time, where it's going to go. And one of the themes in Once Upon Atari, my book, is this battle inside of me about which one to go. Can I get into flow, because that was a beautiful place to be and a place I wanted to be, and there were so many things pulling at my time and distractions to go. And the fact is, doing ET sort of pushed me into one of the most intense, concentrated development efforts that was brutal on me in some ways, but was an amazing thing to experience at the same time. And in Alamogordo, we were at the dig, and then suddenly they came up out of the ground, and I was literally emotionally overwhelmed in the moment. And people thought I was sad. People thought, "Oh, you're sad," because look, they did find the game. They did bury his game after all. That's too bad. And that wasn't. They really missed it. That wasn't the thing at all. What it was that I realized that I was sitting there in this crowd of like 400 people who were cheering and excited and yelling, and all this was going on. And what I realized was this little product that I did in 5 weeks, like 30 years before, was still creating excitement and interest and focus and talk and discourse. And that was, as a media producer, that was so exciting to me, to think my product is still alive. It's still there. It's still working. And that meant the world to me. And it was so gratifying in that moment that I was literally overwhelmed.
Yeah, people who say that, who go with the legend that it sold so badly they had to put it in the pit, every single one of them had a copy of that game. Everybody that ever had an Atari had ET that I've ever talked to. So they know the game. It wasn't a bad seller, at least from...
And I do want to say real quick, onceuponatari.com is a place you could find the book. Or you could go online, and because I'm afraid we might be running out of time, and I want some instant gratification right now.
Jason's in charge of running the show.
I actually sent you a message on Twitter. I said, "We'll go as long as you want to go, RJ, because this one's yours." So,
I'm perfectly fine to keep going as long as Howard's good to go.
Oh, in that case, I don't take it back, but I'm willing to remind you where you can get the book again later. But I'm happy to talk some more, because I'm really enjoying this.
You've got me thinking about other things here, about how we want things faster, and faster communication in computers required dealing with tiny little packets and getting as much information in them little packets as we could to ping them across the lines. And we've started, now that we've got social media, we've started doing that with our own minds and our nonverbal communications. Jason, you remember the Star Trek Next Generation episodes where it was Shaka when the walls fell, and Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
Yeah.
I've seen entire conversations on Twitter without a single word typed out. It's nothing but memes, and it's like, and it has meaning. You can tell exactly what they're talking about, but they said nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's condensed information into an image.
Well, and emojis and LOL and all this, and I will, to my dying day, take Mrs. Boss to task for pronouncing it lol, because it's not a word. It's an abbreviation. It's LOL. It's not lol.
It's not lol.
It's not lol.
People really sort themselves out with that sort of stuff when they start pronouncing it and things. It's absolutely.
Yeah, because LMAO, I was like, it's not Lamau. You don't say Lamau, so it's not lol. I mean, but it goes back to that whole kids these days, right? It's that get off my lawn moment where you look around. And then if you get limb foul,
people go, watch your mouth.
Right.
George is being a joker in my chat, and because I'm not running it, folks who are watching on Critical Blast, I can't highlight your chats. That's why they're not showing up. It's not that I can't see you. It's
yeah, we need to figure that part out, because the the tool that I use, it only connects to one YouTube channel. It's I don't it's a third party plugin on OBS. So I'm gonna have to we're finding things that we're gonna have to refine a little bit.
Pioneering.
I'm not
We only
exactly.
had 5 weeks to do this, Howard.
And tool usage just goes back to one of the fundamental things that led us to this whole technological dilemma that we're in now anyway. So
Yeah, and the thing is, the tool was it invaded the house insidiously. It came in as something fun to do, and then once it was there, it's like, oh, you like these games? Do you know what else this thing can do? And from there, it was off to the races.
Well, and you had what? You had the TSR-80. You had the Tandy, and then my dad at one point had the, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was the word processor unit that had the orange screen, and it was just it was Word. It wasn't even Microsoft Word. It was whatever it was.
Word Perfect.
Word
I think.
Perfect. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And
I
you
had
the
those
same one.
systems, and the Trash 80, and then the Apple II, which was so revolutionary at the time.
Oh, that reminds me. Okay, so bragging moment here for a moment. I don't know if anybody can see this, but you can see over here behind me, over there in the corner.
Is that
Me and
Elisa?
Oh yeah.
That is a Macintosh. It's not a Mac 2. I can't remember. It's the one that came afterwards, I think. And it still works.
Nice.
I can turn it on, but I can't do anything else with it. The mouse will work, but I can't do anything else with it. I was like, well, okay, fine. So
George is asking in my chat, what was Steve Jobs like at Atari? I think you're mixing your metaphors there, George.
No, Jobs was at Atari. In fact, Atari, one of the things Atari's famous for, and this is another thing that I talk about in the book, is the things they didn't do, the opportunities they walked away from. So Steve Jobs and Wozniak were at Atari. In fact, they offered Atari the home computer. They wanted to make a computer for Atari, and Atari said, "No, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing." And then they went and got and leased the building next door to Atari, and that was one of the first Apple buildings. And in fact, we stole their sign one day. That was there was some trouble that came from that. It was because Shenanigans was a very
on
big.
my A phone right now.
Yeah, there it is. And it's Shenanigans were a very big part of your working day at Atari, because it was a way of generating creative thought. It was a way of, you do wacky stuff and you'd never know what ideas came of it. The cool thing about making games at Atari was, think of what your job description is, right? Your job description as a game engineer at Atari was to come into work, and if you had a good day, something existed at the end of that day that never existed before, and it was cool. That was a good day at work at Atari. I've never had that clean or clear or enjoyable a job description anywhere else, except possibly as a therapist. I mean, my job description here is talk to people and see if you can make them better. That's kind of cool too, and relatively open-ended.
Of course, you don't get any reset buttons.
No, it is easier to reset a 2600 than it is an actual client. That's for sure. That's why I had to study longer to become a therapist than I did to become a target programmer.
Do you see any potential in games as a therapy tool?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, that's happening. I mean, even back in Atari days, right? One of the main uses for the 2600, outside of just pure gaming, was rehabilitation of stroke victims. The idea of people redeveloping eye-hand coordination to improve some cognitive capacity and engagement. Those were basic skills that it was, interactive machines are a great way of helping people exercise that. And that was new. They didn't really have anything like that back then. So that's one way it goes. I think another thing, I mean, that's another chapter in the book, right, is the implications of what Atari, what hath Atari wrought, It's like, where did it go from there? The truth is, I think people talk about VR a lot, right? That VR is very exciting, and here it goes, and that's a game technology, that's busting out in the world. I think AR, augmented reality, is far superior to VR in terms of really impacting people's lives, because VR is fun. VR is a cool kind of thing to do, and it's a wacky experience.
Mm-hmm.
But AR, when you can put on a pair of glasses and it can show you which nut to tighten and what tool to use, and it can take a look at what you're dealing with, see what a problem is with it potentially, and walk you through step by step how to fix it, how to become a decent chef by adding this much of this and that much of that, and when to stir it, and reminding you when it's time to take it off the heat, and use the infrared to make sure the heat is correct. You can really become a master of a lot of crafts through AR without having the actual skill. That's it. Now, if you take this idea back to where we were a few minutes ago, the idea that, hey, you don't need to really learn or hone a skill or learn a craft to do anything, AR is going to make that so much worse, because it's going to enable people to actually be effective in some kinds of endeavors without the skill and the training. An area where that's not going to be true is creativity, because and that's one of the things I love about creative endeavors, because no matter how sophisticated technology gets, when it comes down to just creating something that didn't exist before, like humor, like emotion, like drama, they're trying to get there, but it's really hard for computers to simulate that. And if you look at games, we talked about games then and now. Okay. One of the things about the evolution of the games industry that's super clear is there's two ways that games get better. There's two ways games evolve: technologically and creatively, or design wise, right? You can always count on technological innovation. You're always going to find a way to squeeze a few more polys onto a screen, to make a processor a little faster. You can always count on the technological advance going. To have a real design innovation, to come up with a new kind of game play that's compelling, that's the thing that you can't count on. That's where the creative brilliance shows up. That's where, the genius spark needs to be. And that's the thing that's so compelling, that's so interesting, because the technological advances are mechanical, but creativity that's what's universal. That's what's exciting. That's where joy, comes from, at least for me.
And they're trying that. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking of all kinds of almost dystopic futures now. Like with AR, I'm like, yeah, can you imagine being a therapist wearing your AR goggles, talking to somebody, doing facial tick recognition and telling you what the person's feeling and thinking based off body language and suggesting things that you should say. Why study psychotherapy when you could just, put one on and take care of your kids that way? Or, put on AR glasses to learn how to program AR glasses.
Well, the flip side of that, though, is if you're in an emergency situation, say, and you have a trauma victim, you've got, a gunshot wound at a riot event or something, or somebody's been hit, blunt force trauma, or a car accident, or she's pregnant and she's giving birth and we're on the side of the highway. What do I do? I can see some advantages to that, but at the same time, I don't want somebody putting on some augmented reality goggles and climbing into an F-18. It's just, there's got to be some limits there.
It'd be easier to program than delivering the baby.
Maybe.
Well, the thing is, you need to know where it is, and you can look at it. You could say there are technicians and there are innovators, right? And what it can do, what AR can do, is it can increase the skill level of technicians, right? It can take people, it can raise someone's skill level or possibilities with that. But innovators, people who need to really manufacture something or make something, create it out of nothing in the moment spontaneously, it's not really going to help for that. Now, that's not something you need all the time. Yeah. And Jason's point, I think, is really well taken, is that where are the lines? Where do you draw a line between where is it okay for someone to pop into a situation without prior real training or qualifications to make a difference in outcomes? and where is it not appropriate? These are technology raises more questions than it answers. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, and retro game warrior makes a good point in the chat. It's a Pandora's box. Do we really need to open it? Well, I mean, that box is already open. That genie's out of the bottle, because Pokemon Go. Look at something like that. I mean, there's augmented reality that's out there already. Disney is spending how much money to do 15,000 square feet in the parks. That's augmented reality and holographic projectors and screens and whatnot, so you can have this fully immersive thing. I mean, the AR is one thing, but now we're getting into this fully immersive environment that's all projector based and holograms and video screens and all of this. And are we going to be able to even tell the difference anymore between what's real and what's not? I mean, the whole idea of the metaverse, diving into the fake virtual world. And I gotta wonder, Howard, with the psychology of it, how many people are going to dive into that because it's so much easier than dealing with reality? I mean, I just see a train wreck coming at some point that's just going to just be a mess.
Exactly. Ernest Cline, the guy who wrote the foreword for Once Upon Atari, author of Ready Player One, contemplated a lot of this. And it's true that once you get to the point of a neural interface, which probably may not be that far away, when you actually have a neural interface, you won't be able to tell the difference, because what is reality? If you register reality at the point of signals that your brain receives, which is what we respond to and quote feel, then that becomes reality. One thing we've learned, I think if there's anything we can learn about humanity at large, it's that we're always willing to endeavor down the technological road faster than the sociological road. In other words, human beings tend to evolve technologically faster than they evolve sociologically. So we're moving ahead with a level of danger and also a level of excitement that's it's like when you're driving a car and you go faster and you go faster and you go faster, and at some point you're going so fast you can't really control the car. You're going faster than your reaction time makes it safe. But you don't really know where that is usually until you're already there. That's a thing you discover. You don't say, oh, I'm almost there, better back off.
Yeah.
And that's the way people are. I mean, that just seems to be the way we've been so far. And when you tell people, hey, you better look where you're going, look before you leap, as a species, as a race, we don't really do that very well. Right? What we do is, oh, cool, you can go faster, let's go.
Yeah, well, and it's like the whole Google AI thing, the discussion of artificial intelligence and the ethics of it. And you're right, we get the technology first before we figure out, oh, wait a minute, just because we can do a thing doesn't necessarily mean we should do a thing, but too late, somebody's already done the thing. Now we have to
take those frog eggs out of the freezer.
Yeah, we have to figure out those how do we separate those scrambled eggs now that we've had our first oopsie? Oh, yes, now we have to put a warning on the cup that contents inside could be hot and could harm you. It does feel like sometimes, and social media has been the worst of it, but it's not the only example, but it does feel like sometimes we have allowed, through whatever means and whatever reasons there are, whether it's psychological or economic or whatnot, political, we've allowed technology to kind of dominate the way we have conversations. And because of the way we have conversations, it impacts the content of our conversations. The substance of our conversations have been impacted by that, the means of delivery, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's that interplay between what we do and how we do it, and the way we do things shapes the way we think about doing other things. just like the language you speak. People who speak different languages think differently. One of the great things about learning a second language or a third or fourth language is that it gives you a window into a different way of thinking. And when you can think multiple different ways about something, there's solution spaces that are available to you that are not available to people who don't have that capability. And there's an aspect that we're kind of losing some of that, because when we're so tempted to jump into things so quickly and instantly all the time, that there is no thought of exploration. It's just about arriving. And social media creates a lot of good. There's a lot of wonderful opportunities that are presented by it that really do present some real positive things. There's a lot of aged people who are able to stay connected with their families in ways that they wouldn't have without social media. But it has also created opportunities for some real problems to emerge, and for some sort of manipulations to occur, that and that's where a lot of people have focused. You get really smart people and you give them a new tool, and they are going to find clever ways to use it. Whether they do good things or bad things, that's a matter of perspective, right? But I think we all have our takes on that these days. But the truth is, we're developing the kinds of tools that give smaller groups of people much greater leverage over large groups of people in ways that no one has ever experienced or anticipated before. And we're just beginning to see the implications of that today. And it's pretty wacky.
And in 2 years, we're going to have somebody making the face swap to have Howard saying really nasty things about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
That's right. And some of them might deserve it.
You talk about the AR and becoming more real. Obviously, with Pokemon Go, it's a cute little cartoon character set against what's actually being taken. And of course, the first time I played Pokemon Go, my thought was, can we get Mario Kart Go, and then I could mount this in the windshield of my car and just like drive down the interstate and fire off turtles.
Well, and Robert mentions in the chat, he says, isn't Universal planning an augmented reality Mario Kart ride? I have seen photographs of the ride. They've done the preview. I don't know if there's an augmented reality component to it, but I think there is. I want to say that I did see a photograph of the goggles that are going to be used as part of that ride. So yeah, I do think there's going to be some kind of an AR or VR type of piece to this, but I don't know how much of it in the entire ride altogether.
As the graphics,
and that's what new design is. That's what new design is right now. It's a new way of thinking. It's one thing to design rides in a park in the 50s, in the 1950s. It's another thing to design rides in a park where you can start having video and things like that, enhancing the experience in the 80s and the 90s. And now when you have electronic tie-ins and you can count on people having their own cell phones to have a different way of plugging into the experience, designing a ride experience in the 2020s, it's a different way to think design-wise. And it's interesting to me to see the evolution of design. Like you say, people have to think about these things in different ways. The new tools are introduced, there's new possibilities, and there's also new ways to mess with it. Just like there were ways to mess with rides in the 1950s, and there was ways to mess with rides in the 80s, and there's ways to mess with these rides also. As you know, as the experience gets deeper and richer, the ways to mess with it also get deeper and richer, and that then also creates other possibilities. It's it's like the people who would hack into businesses would end up getting hired as security consultants, right? The whole cybersecurity industry was launched by hackers who essentially were criminals initially, and got co-opted into the security execs and the chief researchers. And so that's evolution, in technology.
Story is one of my favorites. But as the goggles slowly, or maybe not so slowly, go away, and the AR interface is within your own eyeballs and within your own eardrums, and as graphics get further and further away from looking cartoonish to looking slightly pixelated, to looking like video, um, you're not that far away from having a generation that's self-inducing paranoid schizophrenia, where you're seeing things that aren't there, and you're hearing things that aren't there, and you're reacting to them as part of your reality. Um,
We're already
and everyone
seeing
else is going to
parts of
think
that.
you're nuts, but they're all
Absolutely.
nuts too.
Yeah.
That's already happening in social media in a lot of ways. But the deep fake where you're talking about going, yeah, we're on the verge of it now. And when that becomes a tool that's available to everybody for a couple of bucks, going to be an interesting world.
What I find
Yeah, well,
interesting is the use of technology as a data mining tool, because yeah, you've got the entertainment aspects of it, and you have the instructional and educational aspects of it, and organizational stuff. But I had the opportunity to shoot some video down in Bentonville, Arkansas, a few years ago, and they were talking to a number of people. Here's how you become a vendor at Walmart, type of thing. These kind of workshops. And one of the things that they talked about, there was a guy who came in and did a presentation on this app software that they had that could not only track your purchases, but could also ping your phone. And so when you get within 5 miles of a Walmart, for example, we know that you buy Hunt's ketchup on the regular. You've bought Hunt's ketchup every week for the last 5 weeks. And so now you're getting close to a Walmart. We're going to ping your phone and send you a coupon and say, hey, we're going to give you $1 off of Hunt's ketchup over here at Walmart today. And tracking purchases and travel and all of the different things that you do through the course of your day. I think one of the reasons why a lot of people have fallen away from doing QR codes is the fact that the QR code can be programmed to put all sorts of tracking widgets into your phone that aren't supposed to be, yeah, I'm scanning the restaurant menu, but I'm also connecting to this thing here and this thing here and this thing here and this thing here that's going to go through and spiderweb into everything that I do online and basically start building a profile of this person to we talked about today when we started talking about finding a new hosting platform because we'd gotten too big for the WordPress platform we were on. One of the things back and forth in the emails is we mentioned HostGator as a possibility, and suddenly I'm seeing all these ads for HostGator everywhere on social media and everywhere. I'm like, okay, this is now a surveillance device, and has been for a very long time. And I think a lot of people don't even realize it. They don't even think about it that way.
Twitter's definitely using that because I've tested this because it happened to me twice with two separate things. So I started running tests on it myself. But I'm 35 years in the IT industry, Howard. I work for a bank with data scientists. So my other laptop is usually right beside me here since we're all work from home these days. And we were working with some IBM Watson projects. And I'd be on Zoom calls on that computer talking about how IBM Watson was going to be handling this and that and whatever. And my phone is right here, and I'm not typing. I'm not looking anything up. I go back to this computer, which has the same Twitter as my phone does, and Twitter is advertising IBM Watson to me in promoted ads. That's the second time that happened to me. The first time was when we drove past the mathnasium, and I just pointed to it, and I said, we should enroll our son there and help get him some help. Didn't say mathnasium, didn't say anything, but the geolocation and the contextual wording, Twitter started advertising mathnasium to me with promoted tweets.
They figured it out. 1984, the George Orwell book. So that was a vision it was a paranoid vision of a government that's got its hooks into everything and no one can do anything. And it used to be that everybody was paranoid about Big Brother, where that was going. Now there's a TV show called Big Brother that people think is so cool, right? What's happened, I don't think anybody foresaw the idea that when Big Brother would really show up, and I think it's fair to say we're living in Big Brother times now, but that it would be that you volunteer, that people would put their life on social media. People lined up to do it. It wasn't anybody had to come suck it out of them and steal it from them. People just offered it up and handed it over. And that's like the both the genius and the insidious nature of it, right?
Yeah,
Is that it's
I've
the
said
thing people
before.
volunteered to be in.
I've told people before that, if 50 years ago, people had knocked on our parents or our grandparents' door and said, I have a little box here that's going to tell us where you are. As long as you carry this, we'll always be able to find you. And by the way, we would, if you would just, put this Q-tip in your mouth, we'll put your DNA on file for you, and you won't have to pay us a thing for it. We'll just do all that. And it got chased off with a shotgun. But 50 years later, if you carry this little box around, it'll tell you where we are. You can have it for $800.
Yeah.
And
That's a
for an
steal.
extra 100, we can put your DNA on file. We're like, take my money, just go. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have taken it for free, but we'll pay for it.
Yeah. El Croto over on Critical Blast. I did figure out how to get. It's not perfect. It's kind of a makeshift. Let's just kind of jury rig it tonight. But it says I switched to a flip phone in 2018. Now I do notice this from Lorenzo saying that he can barely hear anybody and the volume's up full blast. So we're gonna have to check that. I have everything here where it's supposed to be. So I don't know. We'll see.
I can get closer to my mic, but then I look like this.
There's still a bug every now and again that we're running across. This being the first time we're doing this, but we'll definitely do a post-mortem on it and see what's happening, because I'm seeing RJ's stream flash every now and again, and I'm not sure what's causing that. So
I'm seeing that happen
El
here on the monitor.
El Croto says
And I
they can hear
am
us fine.
turning into a pumpkin also at this point, so I may have to get rolling pretty soon here.
Okay.
Well, that
All right.
sounds like our cue, Jason.
It does. Yes. You want to sing us out?
Well, I do want to say that onceuponatari.com, or look for Once Upon Atari on Amazon. At onceuponatari.com, you can get autographed copies of the Once Upon Atari book and the Once Upon Atari DVD series. The DVD series, the book is my story. The DVD series is all the people who worked at Atari making games, telling you our day-to-day antics, what life was like at Atari, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a pretty fun series, and the book is my personal story, which was pointed out to me was missing from the documentary series, so I overcompensated and produced
You've
the whole
almost got
book.
the full package. You've almost got the full package there, Howard. You know what's missing, right?
What's that? The
Once
audiobook?
Upon Atari the game.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. I'm still waiting to see what the win condition is.
And when you fall into the pit, that's crunch time. When you can't get out of the pit until your task is complete, right?
You fall into the pit, and if you notice a bunch of teeth on either side closing in, that's crunch time.
Yes.
All right. Well, Howard, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us tonight. This has been an illuminating conversation, and hopefully viewers on both sides of this are able to take something away from it. Yes, we definitely encourage you to pick up Once Upon Atari from wherever books are sold. I believe if you look at the lower portion of the Critical Blast one, there will be an Amazon link to this. If there's not one now, there will be if you're watching on the replay, because I'll make sure that it exists afterward. And there will also be a link to onceuponatari.com, so you can go directly there and buy the autograph copy should you prefer.
Well,
Jason?
I've really enjoyed talking with both of you, Jason and RJ. This was wonderful. I love it. I'm just sorry I'm running short of time now. I'd be happy to come talk to you again. I've really enjoyed talking with the two of you. It's very stimulating.
We'd
Well,
love that. We'd love that, Jason. We can work something out somewhere down the road. Do this again.
Absolutely. And let me go ahead and pull this up real quick so people can see all of the different social media spots where you can find our channels. Mine's a little bigger, just
Bragger.
because we've dived into this way too much. But you can find Critical Blast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Stimulus, and YouTube. Stimulus is a new thing. And we're on all the usual places. We're on 10 different social media channels, and it's just a mess. But
That looks like the front page to the Legion of Superheroes comics.
Doesn't
when they
it?
would show the characters. It's just all those things.
All right, so that's it for tonight. Howard, thanks very much for being here, sir. We do appreciate it. This was fun. This was a good first episode.
This was. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
and thanks everybody for being here. We will do this again. Have a good night.
You just hope you had a blast.